Hi there, friendo. I am already 1000% aware that everyone on the internet has already made YouTube videos about how terrible Fantastic Beasts was, but I've been avoiding watching them because I kind of wanted to make my own video where I was not swayed by other people's opinions. So here we go, because I've been putting this off too long and I still can't sleep because my sleep meds have not kicked in, and I might fall asleep halfway through, like I did during the movie. I think my greatest fear while making this video is that I'm going to crack some joke about J.K. Rowling's use of, metaphors, and I'm going to accidentally either say something she said or contradict something equally insane that she said. But I really can't be bothered to keep up with this weird brand of radical feminism that she's just trying to, like, push into, like, the pores of her story. So it's fine, here I am. I watched The Crimes of Grindelwald, right? And what followed was a call to my sibling for about 55 minutes. I've decided that there are 3 aspects in which I think this movie's really bad. Actually, I think 4 aspects. I think it's bad as a Harry Potter story. I also think it's bad as a story. I also just think it's bad as a movie. And I also think it's bad as, like, a meta-narrative, because apparently that's what J.K. Rowling's into now. Those are just the filters through which I'm judging all of these things, but I actually have a lot of much more specific and, frustrating problems with this movie. So, generally, I have a pretty easy way of figuring out if a movie's bad, and that's if I have to make memes of my head to cope with it. Like, when I was 17, I watched one of the Paranormal Activity movies in theaters, and there was this guy drinking milk, and the movie was so bad that I just kept making jokes about how, like, oh, the milk's sour, so he's just hallucinating, or something like that. And I don't really do that with good movies. Like, occasionally I'll make a joke here and there, or if I've seen it a lot, I will. But with bad movies, boy, do I. Anyway, not the point. The opening scene of the movie is just Grindlewald killing a bunch of people. Spoilers. And he is, like, this little spiky creature that sneaks out, and it's torturing people, and as it escapes, it just starts screaming, and I knew that it was me, which is bad, because for so long I wanted to support J.K. Rowling. She was, like, a huge inspiration to me as a child. I loved writing, I wanted to be just like her, and now not so much. Now I don't want to be like her, I just want to be like this screeching creature that's displeased with her. Also, I did also identify with the people who took forever to die, or, like, the next scene where, like, the boat truck was falling off and, like, clinging desperately to Newt's coat. Oh, and, like, the nifflers. Oh man, the nifflers. The nifflers were the first moment I knew I wouldn't like this movie. Like, I went into this movie and I knew it was going to be bad, but I thought there was a chance it would be fun bad, I guess. Or like, oh, I enjoyed this, but it wasn't a good movie. Or even, I didn't enjoy it, but I also don't feel like I wasted 2 hours of my time. But no. You see, as an example, I watched Solo in theaters, and Solo wasn't a good movie, but I also didn't sit there and hate that I was watching it at every moment, unlike in this movie where I did hate it at every moment. So there's gradients of bad movies, that's what I'm saying here. the best part of this series is obviously the Fantastic Beasts. Like, that's the appeal to them, is they're cute or cool. They're the best part because they're like Pokemon. There's so many, and you get to learn about all these different ones, which is awesome, except it's also the worst part. It's not just like Pokemon in good ways. It's kind of like you see some of them mention the original series and you're like, oh, they're back. How nice. But then it's also like a terrible Pokemon game where they ran out of ideas and they were like, oh, you're the beaked seaweed Loch Ness monster that we will call Flaldruck. Oh, and you're the Voltron Lion Curtain, which we'll call Rumble Roar. I'm creative. Okay. So from a Harry Potter's perspective, the creatures tend to be either like forced fan service callbacks to the original series, or just like weird, desperate amalgamations, which isn't good. From a story perspective, they seem to just kind of pop in and out at random times, so you aren't really ever completely sure, like, what the stakes or the benefits or, like, it's just kind of hard to tell what's going on and follow what people have on their side. Also, they're just not really well explained, and not only are they badly explained, and I really hate to say this because I'm not really a movie critic, and I'm generally very lenient on this, but oh my god, the CGI was so bad. Like, the Nifflers were just like rubber, which, okay, maybe that's what you're going for. But there is this one, like, motion pattern. It's like this kind of like texture-y thing that they use on everything. There's the scene with the drowning baby's blanket. There's the scene where they're summoning Grindlewald. There's like the lion's like curtain tail thing. And even like the seaweed monster dude. Like they all have this like flowing cloth, like a flowing like lacy cloth pattern going on. And it just takes different contexts from the textures of the creatures, but I swear it must be the same pattern because it looked like it. Every time I was seeing this, I was like, why does this look familiar? And probably because it is. Also, I hated in this movie that none of the magic made sense, which is a complaint that lots of people had with the original Harry Potter, but like at least in the books, which are the actual thing J.K. Rowling wrote, it was quite well defined, or at least defined to the extent that it would make sense for them to know about. But in the movie, there were probably about 3 spells that I can think of that they said out loud, and that's like spells we already knew that are pretty inconsequential, like Reparo, Accio, and Stupefy. And on one hand, I am definitely glad that they found a way to show that the adult characters are stronger than the children characters. I think that that is good, because you see the children characters in Harry Potter performing a lot of really, really advanced magic, and you sit there and you're like, well, if children can do this, then, like, super trained adults should be able to do, like, a lot more. Which, that's good, but I don't necessarily think it was a good choice to have almost all of the spells be nonverbal. Do you guys remember that Tumblr post? Also, rip Tumblr, like, have fun. You guys were dying anyway. But do you guys remember that Tumblr post that was really popular on, like, the entire internet several years ago? And it was that scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban where the guy's stirring his coffee with his finger. And a lot of Tumblr users were like, he must be the most powerful wizard, he's not even using a verbal spell, and he's not using a wand. And they were like, that doesn't make sense in the wizarding world we've seen so far. Like, But I guess the thing about that is that usually when we see things like that, it's like either it's a really powerful wizard, like an Auror, or we walk into the scene after the spell's already been cast. It's not like this guy is legitimately just like using magic from his fingers. He probably already cast the spell with his wand and is just kind of continuing it. Or like Molly Weasley washing her kitchen dishes. It's not that hard. So like for Aurors, it's totally fair in the story for them to have them using nonverbal spells, which isn't a thing that we've seen loads of from lower powered wizards in the original. Or like we haven't seen this spell all the way through to know that it was nonverbal. Okay, cool. But there's a point in the story in which you lose all context of what's going on, or what the stakes are, or what characters are capable of, and it just, there's no abilities or limits, and it just loses all, like, coherency as a story. From the perspective of a film, that kind of setup means that the shots themselves should convey what's going on, if it's not going to directly tell you. But I don't really think they did a good job at that. The filmmaking, I'm not an expert, but it didn't really seem, like, good. Like, it didn't make up for, like, the bad things in there. Where there are 3 kinds of shots, and all of them involve the camera blurring in and out of focus on characters' faces versus the background. The 3 shots were long-range shots that established the scenery and showed the characters, like, walking onto the set, wherever they were, maybe they apparate on. The second kind of shot was, oh look, let me show you the character. Here's Albus Dumbledore's outfit. And then the third kind of shot was just these really uncomfortable close-ups. Like, not just really uncomfortable in the sense that, like, I wouldn't want my face there, but, like, I could see parts of someone's face I never want to see. Like, even if I got that close to a person, I would not be able to see these things in these shots. And it's just like shot reverse shot with a lot of these, which is, I need a word that's stronger than miserable for this, and I'm not sure if I can think of one offhand. And again, just like the flowing carpety texture, like, this obviously does take on different context depending on, like, how fast it's going, depending on which objects they're zooming in and out of, or what characters, or where the jump cuts are placed and how quickly, but it just kind of ends up being, like, convoluted and disorienting and dull all at the same time, which I guess that's an achievement. I watched this in 2D, so I might not have the best experience with it, but everyone who I knew who watched it in 3D told me it was even worse than I described, so I can only assume that if I watched in the 3D experience, my points would hold up even worse. I also don't really know where to talk about this, but the cuts of the movie were kind of weird to me. Like, I didn't really get it. You know how a lot of people hated the comedy in The Last Jedi because they said it sounded really marvelly and, like, awkward. And I do get that, but on the other hand, I think that it's at least better and closer to the original trilogy than the prequels were, so I'll take it. Like, you know, like the scene where, like, Han picks up the phone, he's like, situation normal. You know, it's closer to that. So I like that. I like that no one said anything about sand. Cool. Well, nothing dramatic about sand. But I also get the criticism, even if I liked parts of it. But Fantastic Beasts is unquestionably the worst iteration of that I've ever seen. Because I couldn't even tell which parts were supposed to be funny. Like, I felt like it was supposed to be, like, awkward humor, but I also wasn't sure if it was even supposed to be humor. Like, obviously, rubbery CGI creatures flying towards you are supposed to be funny. I get that. But then there's this scene where they lock, like, Tina and Newt up, and the guy who locks them up is like, if he doesn't die, I die. And then then the guy turns around and he just straight up collapses, like, barely missing a beat afterwards. Like, that was the second funniest scene in the movie to me, and I don't know if it's supposed to be. And obviously the first funniest scene was when Grindlewald goes, I hate Paris. Because it just kind of sounds like this scene.
Okay, that tears it. Venice sucks!
And yeah, I agree. It's like, you've seen the wonders of Hogwarts, let's spend the new series exploring all the terrible parts of the wizarding world. Like, I can't wait for Universal Studios to build, like, a freak show where they go and watch an exotic Asian woman snake dance. That sounds awesome. I'm gonna pay money to see that. Wow. You know how earlier this video I said that I had trouble understanding any of the stakes? That actually impacted my viewing experience less than you would think that it would. And that's because I don't think they made an effort, or at least didn't come through, to make any of the characters likable. And it's not that I hate the characters as much as I genuinely don't understand why I should care about them. Like, Queenie hexed her boyfriend into getting engaged with her, and I understand that there's a reason. But they tried to tell us that she was a likable character, and knowing that she's a Legilimens and can understand and feel his fear, I guess she has no empathy to that, which I would classify as being absolutely horrendous and rather disgusting, honestly. Also, Queenie joins Grindelwald, which I thought was kind of funny, because I was thinking, it's weird that she would do that, since she is a Legilimens, so she can read minds, and so she would know that he's evil. But I realized that because he's a powerful wizard, he probably knows occlumency pretty well, and can set up a mind barrier. Which I think she would also find weird, because in the book, the mind barriers are just like a brick wall, or like a stone wall or something. And so if I saw that on someone's mind, I'd be pretty suspicious. But then, maybe he found a way to construct a separate mind apart from his other one. But she even... It's not in the books, but J.K. Rowling retcons a lot, so I'm not really even going to question that that could be a possibility at this point. So, presumably Queenie would still read the minds of the other people around her, and realize that this is an unambiguously awful concept, even if she couldn't directly identify Grindelwald's thoughts, which we don't know either way if she could or not. Speaking of Grindelwald, I am probably biased, and so are all of us, collective recognition that Johnny Depp is not great. It doesn't make sense that everyone in this universe, even in this universe where he's not actually Johnny Depp and he doesn't have the negative connotation surrounding him, I don't think that people would find him very convincing. It's like, he does Voldemort things, but I'm going to be genuine with you. Voldemort got away with that because he grew up being handsome, so people gave him a bunch of things until he had enough things to kill people. But Voldemort was a pretty boy, and Grindelwald looks like Johnny Depp made a Guy Fieri costume. Like, he made, like, this cosplay wig for Guy Fieri really, really badly. And then in every shot, they turned the contrast and the clarity up to max so you can make out, like, all of his weird, pale alien pores, which made the extreme close-ups the worst ASMR video I've ever seen. And I've been shown some very weird ASMR. I guess I just genuinely don't understand how this man could convince someone to do anything besides sell him meth, honestly. Like, I get it. When Rowling invented him, he was supposed to be Wizard Hitler, and now I guess he's supposed to be Trump. Which, okay. That's literally insane. But okay. Because his entire platform is that Muggles will have tanks and will kill us with bombs. But they don't know that wizards exist. The conclusion of the last movie was a magic solution to wipe the minds of thousands of people from memories that pertain to wizards. And I get that that might not constantly be a solution, but you have magic, and I think you'll think of something. I think that you can prevent yourself from getting killed by a bomb or a tank. And I really don't care, J.K. Rowling, that you're trying to do a metaphor. Like, I don't think it's a good one. But if you're going to do a ham-fisted metaphor every 2 minutes, at least make it semi-coherent. And also, you're wizards! Again, the entire movie was people using magic in, like, ways that didn't make sense, or people not using magic when it would have been very convenient and benefited them. The stakes don't make sense. But neither do their abilities. So, it all shakes out, doesn't it? God will solve all our worries. The Wizard Hitler metaphor kind of made sense. If she'd elaborated on it, probably, maybe. Why is she trying to make him Donald Trump? Like, I don't like the man. But why are you doing this, J.K. Rowling? I loved you. Why did she do this with Nagini? I don't really have anything to say here because I think everyone else has already said a bunch of different opinions. But I do want to let everyone know that I think that this is absolutely mental. Do you guys remember how there was this weird rumor that the snake from the first movie that Harry freed in the zoo turned out to be Nagini, and obviously it wasn't true because it didn't make sense and they were different kinds of snakes. So that wasn't true. And instead we got an objectively worse truth. Like, I would have rathered her retcon that snake into being Nagini than this. None of the characters really had any motivations that made sense. I didn't really understand where any of this was going or why anyone was doing anything at any given moment, which I understand that it is much harder to flesh out characters in a movie than in a book because you have much less time, but in that case, put more focus on it, or write a book, or, J.K. Rowling, are you listening? Or have each movie have, like, a central focus, so you aren't just, like, throwing a bunch of character rocks in a pond and just hoping that one of them is going to skip. That would be a good plan, honestly. I will be really honest with you. Halfway through the movie, I kind of, like, came to, like, my own consciousness, and I realized that I have been sitting like this. For the entire movie. I just had my hand covering most of my face as I died. Which isn't great. But I do want to let you know that there are things I liked about this movie. As an example, I do like the concept of exploring love potions and consent in relationships. I think it's really interesting to say, oh, this character, who doesn't have to be a good person, you can make Queenie a bad person, that's alright. This character made their lover get engaged to them using a love potion. That probably isn't an alright thing to do, and we can explore that theme, because that's an alright theme to explore. That's pretty interesting. Ambiguous morals are kind of a thing I like in a lot of things. I also think that it was a good idea to include Nicholas Flamel in these movies. I think that they could have used him as a lot more than just kind of like a callback and a drawback to the original, because his alchemy is an incredible concept in the magical world, and there's so much linked with immortality for wizards, and we see that could be a good tie-in to the original. We could tie in his experiences with immortality versus Voldemort's, and it could be a question about what's right and what's wrong and the choices they made. Oh, but he is barely in the movie, and his wife is literally never in there, and he really only interacts with a muggle who comes up to him and is like, "Crystal ball!" Which, you lived with a witch for, like, a long time now. I don't think you're going to be confused by crystal balls. Okay. And they show the Philosopher's Stone really quickly, for like half a second. Great. Oh, also, in his conflict, this is what really kind of ruins this for me. Nicholas Flamel is a good callback character if you're going to draw on the themes of his immortality, where his life is kind of really important and influential. But they didn't even make that his conflict with it. It wasn't ever, oh, if I go out and fight, I'll maybe die, which is really terrifying for me. It is, I am frail and weak. I might have trouble getting there and fighting. What else do I like? I like Lita. She was pretty alright. I mean, honestly, I don't know if it's because I have bad facial recognition or just because I found all the characters to be kind of dull and generic, but I had trouble distinguishing pretty much all the female characters except Queenie because she's rather distinct, and a lot of them acted pretty similar besides her, so that was difficult. Credence' entire plot line made no sense, and I don't really want to talk about that, because if I say more about it, I'm just going to become more disillusioned with this movie and the series and J.K. Rowling and all of Harry Potter and the Wizarding World, which I don't really want to do. But suffice it to say, I can't wait until Rowling reveals that the hippogriffs and centaurs were actually metaphors for Japanese internment camps, that Norberta the dragon is a trans lesbian dragon, and that Voldemort actually hates Neville because Neville's parents are Muslims, and Voldemort is the other Trump. Oh, and now there are elves apparently, which, are the elves going to be white supremacists? I think that would be really funny if the elves were also a metaphor, because, like, elves exist in this story, and elves are such, like, a Tolkien thing, and, like, isn't it ironic that elves exist in this story when Tolkien hated allegory? Incredible. I can't do this anymore. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.